This is actually a perfect lead way. Do you want to pull up that Guardian article and just read a little bit of it so people can know exactly what's going on?
Not the Wired one?
The Wired one. Sorry, Wired.
Okay, so it says the Apple antitrust case and the stigma of the green bubble. The stigma, they got it in quotes. The US government's Apple lawsuit leans on the social cost of not owning an iPhone. What? The US government's argument in the Apple lawsuit leans on the social of not owning an iPhone.
Well, um, Apple, I don't remember. It was something where someone made a point like, "Oh, my family member doesn't get green message or whatever." And Tim Cook said, "Well, at least they own an iPhone. Like you don't own an iPhone. It's like a classist thing." But it is weird that that's what they're leaning on. But there is a lot of other things that they're leaning on too.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, and I even kind of leaned into it. We did today with like the green bubble thing and all that. But I do think it is the most on the ground facing issue that would make people interested in the rest of the lawsuit. Like, I mean, I know there's somebody in your family who has an iPhone, who has an Android, and because like he can't get the videos the same as everybody else and all that kind of stuff, it ends up like they do it. That isn't that part of this lawsuit as well, like that they make it incompatible with others as, or should I just read it? I'm
Well, you
already
can
trying
read
to
it
talk
or
too much.
we can summarize it.
Just
Uh,
so everybody knows, Prim knows a lot more about this than me. He's more read up on it. So that's why I'm asking him questions because I don't know a lot about it. Should we read it? What do you
yeah,
think?
so you want to read it
Yeah,
just a little
okay.
bit more?
Okay. So, and then, yeah, an unusual argument for antitrust. Back in 2022, at the annual Code Conference, where tech luminaries submit to onstage interviews, an audience member, oh, here we go. Yeah, it's the story you just said. An audience member asked Apple CEO Tim Cook for some tech support. And it says, quote, I can't send my mom, sorry, excuse me. I can't send my mom certain videos, he said. She used an Android device, which means she can't access Apple's iMessage. Cook's now infamous response, buy your mom an iPhone. Ooh, yeah, that's
And they're
bad.
using that in the lawsuit.
Ooh, because Prim, when I was reading this, I was like, oh, they put a plant. They put a plant in the audience because we've seen that before. People planting, not naming anybody's name. I'm not naming a name. I'm not making an accusation, but we have seen for certain people planting fake evidence or planting certain things they want to use in a lawsuit. Again, nobody's name has been mentioned here. Do not assume. But that was my first thought, like, oh, they've been setting him up. But then I mean, even if they were, he walked right into it with this. Okay, all right, y'all. So, long story short, this paragraph, if it's unclear in any way. 2 years ago, there's this tech conference. Somebody stood up and said, "My mom has an Android. She cannot send. I can't send her certain videos. I can't send her certain stuff." Now, the person he was asking this question to is the CEO of Apple. So he stands up, asks the Apple CEO, "Hey, help me out. I can't send my mom these videos." And then the CEO of Apple says, as a solution, buy your mom an iPhone.
Actually, now that you said it, now thinking about it, this is an interesting. Today it's being used against them. But I think at the time, again, I'm guessing in my opinion,
Mhm.
assuming it could have been a plant. This is, if you look at it, who was it? It was the annual code conference. It was people that are very familiar and know iPhones, Androids, everything with technology. They're very well detailed. Like whoever's asking that question will also know what it is, what the technology is. It's all iPhone thing. So either they were trying to set him up and he walked perfectly into it, or I at that time it could have been used as a meme to promote Apple, be like, buy your mama iPhone. It's a social thing.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could be taken in a few different ways, and I don't know what he meant when he did say it, but I definitely know from, like, a legal perspective, this is not, legal advice. This is just something if I'm taking it as a test in school would say, um, that's really not a good statement for him, because they can use it in that way of like, you literally were encouraging people as a solution. Then he's got to say, "Oh, I was joking." Then he got to prove he was joking or whatever, you know. But no, I do agree with you that at the time nobody was thinking about it in this context, or I shouldn't say nobody. I'm sure plenty of people were, but the general public wouldn't have been so outraged about this. They would have probably laughed. But yeah, when you think about it, are they doing that on purpose to make people buy more iPhones? To me, that's a much bigger deal than the social cost argument. But that's just my opinion.
No, I agree. It's putting your foot in your mouth.
Yeah. Okay. Cook's remark and Apple's recent decision. Okay. So that remark plus Apple's recent decision to block the third party app Beeper from bridging the Android to iMessage interoperability chasm are two of the many examples of allegedly monopolistic behavior cited by the US government's antitrust lawsuit against Apple. So the US government files this lawsuit against Apple. They cite many examples of behavior they claim the government claims is like a monopoly. Basically, like the behaviors are monopolistic. And of the evidence being used, we have the CEO's remark to buy an iPhone and also their decision to block. Now, what's this about? Are they gonna explain more about this, or do I need to know? Or
Well, we can if you finish this paragraph and then we can just discuss it and
okay,
discuss what's going on here.
okay. So central to the case is Apple's practice of quote locking in iPhone customers by undermining competing apps, using its proprietary messaging protocol as glue, and generally making it challenging for people to switch to other phones. As a longtime Apple and iPhone user, I would say this last one definitely I would agree with as a customer. Generally making it challenging to switch to other phones. Like I am locked in. That is true. I think I've even said that terminology before. Like just for to make everything work across platforms, it's like they have the AirDrop and the, cloud and the this and the that, and it's like to try and use like a not Apple is very hard.
So now we can discuss this topic of should the government be doing this? Um, what are the issues, and how can this run away and be used against the people and just overall? Because Apple's argument, and I know a lot of people that use Apple will say, hey, the iPhone is secure. We can secure it better because we're not letting any third parties in. So that service you were talking about, Apple might have found a reason how to not let them on, say that them playing around with messages messes up their security. Apple always uses that as a big one, the security. Uh, about during 2 years ago, Epic Games also filed a lawsuit against Apple to be
Epic
able to.
Games.
Yep, Fortnite.
Uh-huh, okay. This is
Uh,
ringing a bell.
so they had filed a lawsuit. They had actually won, allowing their payments because Apple wouldn't allow their own payments, people to have their own payment processing on there. So that was a huge problem. Uh, the Apple iPhone charger used to be their own charger, and now because of EU, they've had to change the charger to USB-C. So Apple's argument be we give this all different stuff and people want it. And if someone doesn't want it, there is the Android version. There's a lot of phones with Android out there. So let them buy that. They don't have to buy an iPhone. And there's Android phones that are as expensive as Apple. So it's not only a money thing, right? Because those Samsung Galaxies and Notes or whatever the folds get up there as much as iPhones. So now the question comes, what is the right way to go about it? What do you think? And how or is the government stepping in? Because I can see both sides of it, right? The government
I need to
stepping
see
in.
a little bit more of their arguments. Let me see. Central to the case is the locking in. Accusations are backed up by lawyerly references to the Sherman Act. That's the Antitrust Act. The complaint also shows the Department of Justice crafting a cultural narrative, trying to tell a technology tale with a clear message, like an episode of the crime drama Dragnet. Um, in addition to degrading the quality of third-party apps, Apple affirmatively undermines the quality of rival smartphones because messages, please. This is silly, Prim. This is the argument they're going with. The other smartphones, no, this is a weak argument to me.
No, but what about the video? Because someone I know has an Android, I send a video in a group message with them and it messes up the whole video and it messes
I
everything.
think that's a good thing. I think that's a good problem to point out, but I would say for a different legal reason. Like, um, I don't know. I don't want to even really speculate too much, but I would just say, something more like a contract interference or I don't know if that I would say it undermines the quality of rival smartphones because I would focus on like the victim. I would focus on the people. I would focus on the providers, the carriers, like stuff like that. Like, what in the hell do I care? Is it Samsung sponsoring this lawsuit affirmatively undermines the quality of the rival smartphones of all the reasons they could have used? But I agree with you. I think they shouldn't be able to do it. So whatever the legal argument they got to use, I guess, but I don't get it because messages. And this is okay. So in the lawsuit, the attorney general claims a bad thing happens because messages sent between iPhones, on the iMessage are blue and those from Android are green and excluded from many message features. Yeah, like reacting and laughing. Okay. References in cultural, emotional.
So that go up that last Apple has signaled to consumers that the rival phones are for less quality, the suit alleges.
That's the part where I think is not a strong argument.
I think they lose it. Like that's not the argument to be made.
That's
Like
what I was saying. Yeah, I agree.
it doesn't make sense. Like it's just two different types of phones. There's people that only use Android, and then there's people that only use Apple. So the people that use Android and are actually very hands-on techie, can get in the phone, they can actually do a lot more. There's a lot more capabilities. There's a lot more stuff on an Android. So the person has a choice. It's not that Apple is better. It's a opinion and a preference thing. There's Android phones that cost as much or more than Apple phones. So I only had Android phones. I was
Really?
like, I'm not switching to Apple. I'm not switching to Apple. I'm not skipping to Apple. I'm not switching evil. Like I don't want to be locked into everything. And then as the years went on, I got a MacBook, and then it's like, okay, makes it easier to work between the iPhone. And it is very easy. It's so much easier. It's so much, it flows so much better. There's a lot less garbage coming through on it. So I love it. I think it's phenomenal. And now the question becomes if the government steps in and makes them change it, how many of the features change that I like? And I don't know. And we would have to listen to the evidence, in the case to really hear what's really going on. But I like the way the iPhone is, and I know that I'm losing a lot of opportunities or privileges or being able to use the phone in a detailed manner. It's like StreamYards and OBS. It's two platforms, and OBS has so many more features to stream. You can do so much more with OBS, but it requires a lot more technical information. And by the time you learn that, it takes a lot of effort. But once you learn it, it's so much easier. Or someone can jump on StreamYard, click a few buttons, and have a
Me.
podcast to
That's
go.
me.
So,
I want to learn OBS. It seems hard, but that's not my thing I'm good at.
uh, so I think that is a wrong argument uh, to be harping on. I think what you said, make it about the consumers, how consumers can't send it.
Yeah, if I was the lawyer in this case, I would have probably said something like, people can't even send videos to their grandma in India. People are getting like socially excluded. I literally know people, this isn't the family chat, who have separate group chats. At the beginning of law school, this is what I would have said. At the beginning of law school, I would have had someone submit a declaration and say, we were all getting in groups, we were meeting each other, and we were doing those orientation groups of like, where are we going out tonight? Where are we going to? Some of those relationships that I formed that weekend were the most important of all of law school and therefore my whole career. And it was because we hung out that week. We got close at that point. There are people who were in our group chats who we made new, I didn't, somebody else made new group chat without them in it. And then we would have to go back and forth with the two different group chats. Like that person got literally socially excluded. Focus on that. You're worrying about undermining the quality of another phone and their reputation. Then why isn't this that phone company suing? This is a United States Department of Justice lawsuit, and they're not even focusing on the people. They're focusing on affirmatively undermining the quality of rival smartphones.
That's the stuff that blows my mind. I think it is a really good argument, and I think it is something that we should talk about, how all these big companies have so much power, so much control. We have to opt into almost everything with all these companies and agree to give away all our data and how they can share it, which will be our next topic. But um, truly, that is a discussion to be had, how we can help the consumers more, how we can really help the consumers not be bidding for one company set of companies versus another. I think it is a good argument to have, but to
So to
make it
be fair,
about
because I did accuse before I finished, they do make this argument eventually. They do say many non-iPhone users experience social stigma, exclusion, and blame for breaking chats where other participants use iPhones. Um, and it particularly affects teenagers. So they do say it. They dread the ostracism. And I actually, would say that is a good antitrust argument because it shows that it is anti-competition because it's driving down demand of teenagers, for example.
um is it?
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends on all the other factors. That alone, no, that's not enough. No. But if that's, I think that's at least a showing, right? Like it makes also common sense that the teenagers, because of situations like I just described, don't want to be ostracized outside of their group chat. You remember being a teenager, you probably wanted to more fit in as much as possible and not be like the outcast. So that's at least something. Now, does that necessarily mean it is an antitrust winner? No, I think you need more than that. I think you would need, in my opinion, I'm not an
And
expert.
again, we'll have to wait for like all the filings, read the filings and
Yeah.
everything else like that to actually get to the bottom of it. But it's more of just a question of how much should the government be involved?
Mhm.
And just if you like the iPhone the way it is and you're buying it knowing what it is and what it does and you want to buy it, then why does the government have to be involved? But on the other hand, I suffer from it being only an iPhone thing. So I don't even know what I want, from this situation or what's the best way to go about it. Um, so that's why I was like, it's just a good conversation to have on it.
So, I mean, what do you think?
I have no clue. I'm confused. You know, I can see both sides of it, and it's just a hard one. So that's why I figured we talk about it and see
Think
where.
about like, okay, so for me, when I'm analyzing this stuff, I always try to ask myself the main question, like, what's really the most important point? And the most important point to me is like in my day to day life, like just common sense. Do I see an issue? And it's like, well, some of the points in the lawsuit they make, I agree with. Like, I do feel locked in with Apple. I do feel like I'd have purchased more Apple products, namely the phone. Like, I won't even consider switching my phone because of I use it for work across the cloud, jump, this, that, the other. Like, if On the other hand, I do see how like Apple has control over that because it's all Apple's apps. Where if it's like, okay, so it's going to be somebody else, some other third party app situation, like Apple's going to want to have 100% of everything. I guess the big question is like, what is the harm? Is there a harm? And is the harm great enough for the government to need to step in? Like, is the harm that Apple ends up being the only phone company, the only app company and the only phone company that exists? Is that a realistic prognosis for the future? Are they stopping other people from entering or surviving in the market? Because that's really the test. Because the whole point of antitrust law is to make sure that we don't end up with one company that owns everything or that owns all of a sector. That's the main point, not legal advice. So is Apple, like, what are the arguments that Apple is doing things that make it impossible for other third party competitors to compete or to survive within the sector?
To that, I think the arguments are regarding the App Store, where the App Store isn't, they have their own rules. Certain things are allowed, certain things are not allowed. Sometimes it's, are they pushing their stuff, apps that they compete with, what's being pushed, what's not, or what's allowed. And like the whole payment processing was a thing where people sign up for the app and how the payments are done. So there's a bunch of different stuff where that applies.
So Greg is asking, are we not going to interact with the chat? Are we just here to listen? No, we do interact with the chat. I've been kind of scanning it. I haven't seen any like actual questions. It just like seems to be like at least 50% people arguing over Android versus iPhone, which I'm not interested in really participating in. I think like everything else, like y'all should just have whatever phone you want. I'm sure you have your reasons. But I don't know. Like, yeah, like even okay, I think the issue is I'm having a hard time getting my hands around it because there's just so many different things. So let me just narrow it down to like one thing that I can think of. Like, okay, the kids are feeling ostracized at school. Me and you do know, we've admitted, we agree, we could see a world where those green bubbles, make people feel socially outcasted. Is that a reason for a lawsuit? I mean, it's sad. I wish people didn't feel outcasted and stuff, but what's the solution supposed to be?
No, and it's, where does that line get drawn?
Where does it? Yeah. I mean, I guess it's like, it's hard because I am not a pro big corporation. I'm appalled that like 5 companies own all of the media. I absolutely appalled. And to me, that's just as bad as if one owned it. Cause I mean, if 5 is just like one. So I'm very opposed to companies, especially like tech companies like Apple, like owning the entire market. Like you see it happening a little bit with Uber and Lyft. I mean, used to be you could get an Uber for $6, $7. Now it's like a $20 average. And it's like that kind of is starting to look like why we don't want monopolies, why we don't want, there's no more cabs used to be everywhere all over the place. And now they're not, in large part because of Uber and Lyft. And just as soon as they started edging those cabs out, the demand went up for Uber services, which now they charge much more for than they did 10 years ago. So I don't like a big company coming in. I don't like a big corporation coming in and edging out everybody else. But at the same time, I don't like the government coming in where they really don't have a clue. It's a tough one. I could see why you chose this topic for sure.
And people can put it in the chat, what they think, but at end of the day, it's just an interesting thing to think about. And I couldn't come up with a solution, so I was like, let's talk about it. Maybe we can come up with a solution or a thought process, because it's just hard.
Oh, wait, hold on. I clicked the wrong thing. Brittany said, I'm lost here. People are suing over being left on red. No, it's the government is suing. It's a federal lawsuit by the United States of America under the Sherman Act. which is the anti-monopoly, law that we have at the federal level. So the government is suing. And yeah, one of their reasons is it's making people that got Android phones feel like outcast and rejected and socially isolated because they'll get kicked out of chats or they'll be made fun of for breaking the group chat into the green again or whatever. So yeah, I mean, in a way, yeah, people are suing over the social ostracization or whatever. The government is people. And then they killed all the cabs. Exactly.
So now we can probably move on to the next topic because I
Okay.
don't think we can come to
Yeah, I don't know.
it's
I'm
so
I'm
hard.
looking forward. I think my conclusion here is I'm looking forward to seeing a little bit more details, a little more specifics of the arguments. I read half of one article. I don't have enough information to really know, but just reading the half of one article, it does raise a lot of important questions that I am interested in answering when I have more information. That's my conclusion on that one.